Hey guys, how's it going? Dudey here. I'm back with another video. Today I thought I would look into what the Gulag really was, and I wanted to do this for a couple of reasons. A, it interests me, and also obviously I play Call of Duty Warzone. If you don't play Call of Duty, chances are you've probably heard of or seen the memes about the Gulag.
I can't, like it.
In that game, it's a battle royale. You drop in 150 people. If you die within a certain time, you'll go to the Gulag for a second chance at life. And oh my goodness, that could not be a worse representation of the Gulag if you tried. I don't want to come across as an SJW or anything like that because I love the game. But after doing the research I've done for this video, I have to say, was it really necessary for your second chance in Warzone to go to the Gulag? Without further ado guys, let's jump into this video and look into the horrible reality of the Gulag. Basically, the Gulag was a form of enforced labour camp, and there was many of them across Soviet Russia, and they were established during Joseph Stalin's long reign as dictator of the Soviet Union. These Gulags imprisoned over 18 million people and operated from the 1920s all the way through to 1953. In their prime, the Gulag prison camps had anything between 2,000 all the way up to 10,000 inmates in them at a time, and these were not designed to have thousands of people in them. The prisoners would be forced to work for 14 hours a day. They would have barely any food rations, and if they didn't work hard, they would have even less food given to them. And you have to imagine you're doing forced labor on an empty stomach, so you're not going to have the energy to do a good job, and that in turn will mean that you won't be given enough food to then replenish your energy. So many people died of exhaustion as well as disease and of course starvation, whilst others were simply executed, sometimes just for looking at a guard the wrong way. The Gulags were actually made as prisons in 1919 before Stalin was leader. But when Lenin died of a stroke in 1924, Joseph Stalin took over, and his tyrannical rule meant that the population of these Gulags went up and up and up and up. You didn't even have to be a criminal to be put in there. Some of these were political opposition. Some of them were people who simply disagreed with Stalin. Stalin viewed these camps as an opportunity to really increase Russia's industrialization, basically allowing them to get resources like timber and coal and other minerals from the earth essentially for free. Stalin had something called the Great Purge, which was a campaign to basically get rid of any opposition or anyone that disagreed with him on a political level. Anyone that challenged his leadership, straight to the Gulag. Anyone that disagreed with him on whether you should have salt on your chips, straight to the Gulag. A lot of the inmates at these prisons were called kulaks. Now these weren't criminals, these were just people that wanted more for themselves. Farmers that wouldn't sign up to Stalin's collectivization, which was a policy whereby all the farmers would give up their individual farm and instead be a collective across the country, therefore kind of more working for the government than working for yourself. So the farmers that revolted against this ended up straight in the Gulag. The Gulag system and the way that people were put in there was very unfair. Some people were just put in there. Sometimes soldiers would come along and just take massive groups of people and throw them in the Gulag. If your family member was seen as a traitor to Stalin or the state, the family of that traitor would also be put in the Gulag for a duration of around 5 to 8 years, just for simply living in the same household as someone who has been deemed a traitor. Later on into Stalin's rule, he really got hungry for just throwing people into the Gulag. These would be educated people, doctors, scientists, students, artists. Anyone of intellectual caliber would be thrown in the Gulag, which ironically kind of led to his death because he had a stroke and on his deathbed could have really used some of the best doctors in Russia, but they were all in the Gulag, so he had to settle for second, third, fourth, fifth, probably seventh best in the country to try and save his life. Even women and children were thrown into the Gulag. Literally no one was safe from the Gulag. You could be Stalin's right-hand man, disagree with him once, and you will end up in the Gulag. Innocent people thrown in, women, children thrown in, intellects, people who would be really useful to society, doctors, thrown in. It didn't matter who you were. Everyone feared the Gulag because everyone had a chance of going there. And unlike Call of Duty, this was not a second chance at life. This would probably mean your death. So life in the Gulag was obviously horrific. It was overpopulated. It was violent. It wasn't clean at all. There was barely any food. There was a lot of stealing of food. You would probably starve or die of disease in there. Everyone was put to work on large-scale jobs like mining and construction, regardless of the amount of experience that you had. You were ill-equipped. You'd be given the most basic of tools. A lot of digging, for example, was actually bare-hand digging. Some prisoners actually broke their hands, burnt their hands on purpose to get out of having to dig for 14 hours a day using only their bare hands. The weather conditions, obviously being in Russia, were absolutely awful. Sub-zero temperatures, blizzards, all sorts. It goes without saying, obviously there was no PPE or safety equipment when on these jobs. It was very, very common at these mining sites and construction sites for prisoners to die of exhaustion or be beaten and assaulted or just straight up shot by the prison guards. It is thought that around 10% of the Gulag population died every year. Now you've got to think, 10% of 18 million people is a lot of people. Now obviously, technically the Gulag was not a death sentence and some people did survive and you would get out by serving your term, but obviously the terms were very long and unfair. As I said, if you're a family member of a traitor, haven't done anything wrong, you'd still be in there for 5 to 8 years. Now if you worked very hard and surpassed your quota, you would be released early. But you've got to think how hard it would be to work very hard on minimal food intake every day, having basically no energy, working with very poor tools, if any, in sub-zero temperatures. So chances are you won't be released early for working hard because it's basically impossible to work hard. After Stalin's death in 1953, Nikita Khrushchev took control. Because he was a heavy critic of the camps, he saw millions of people released within a few days of Stalin's death from the gulags. However, not all camps were shut down. They were simply restructured into prisons and served the purpose that they should have done from the very beginning. However, it wasn't until 1987 that Soviet leader Gorbachev, who was the grandson of Gulag survivors, decided to shut them down in their entirety. So obviously the purpose of the Gulag was, one, Stalin's dumping ground for anyone that disagreed with him or if he just felt like throwing innocent people into essentially an internment camp, but also cheap labour. But most historians actually agree that the work done by the Gulag prisoners actually made basically no significant contribution to the Soviet economy at all, because obviously the work that was done was so poor because these people didn't have the right tools, they didn't have the right clothing, they didn't have any energy because they weren't fed properly, they weren't looked after, that the work was basically pointless, which means all these people died for no reason. This is truly one of the biggest crimes against Russian people in modern history, if not all of history. The Gulag has left a shadow over Russia. It's left its people scarred and incredibly damaged for generations. And apparently, even to this day, the survivors are too scared to talk about their experiences in the Gulag for fear of the Russian government doing something to them. So that brings me back to my original point. Call of Duty, I love the game. Warzone, I do love the game mode. I just feel like it's a bit insensitive to the victims of the Gulag prisons to name that element of your game the Gulag. There are other atrocities and other internment camps throughout history that are absolutely deplorable, that obviously wouldn't get name checked in a video game. So I feel like the Gulag should be one of those, because you have to understand, not everyone that went to the Gulag prisons should have been there. They weren't all criminals. Some of them were innocent. Some of them did nothing wrong and weren't given a trial or a jury or anything. They were just thrown in there just because. So that's the Gulag, guys. What do you guys think about the horrific reality of what the Gulag actually is? Please let me know down below. I'd love to know your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really do appreciate it. If you want to support me as a creator, Patreon is an amazing way to support creators. I also stream on twitch.tv/Dudey Rhino. It's Tuesday as of uploading this video, which means that I do my Twitch quiz where you can win a prize for coming first place. Last week I gave away a £20 Amazon gift voucher. That's twitch.tv/Dudey Rhino. Thank you so much. Please like, share and subscribe. You have no idea the effect you can make by sharing my videos with your friends and your family. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Sweet one, geese.